Hello, hello, fellow release engineers. Today is May 26th. It is an edition of the SIG Release Engineering Subproject meeting. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you do and say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, and in general, just be really awesome people. So we've got a few things on the agenda, and I'm realizing from the channel that Marky is actually going to be missing the meeting. So let's just going to do a triage party review or update. So his update for today is he's going to be trying to mock out Google Cloud Run this week to run triage party. So for those who are not familiar on the call, what triage party does is it's a pretty cool team triage utility that allows you to basically specify a triage config via YAML. So you can check out cool things like issues that have not been touched in X amount of days, or issues that have comments from multiple comments, or issues that have not been commented on yet. So this tool overall should allow us to do triage a little better. So Marky and a few other people, Marco also is on the call. Marco, do you want to speak a little bit about that if you have any updates?
No, we hadn't had any meeting since the last week, last Monday. We are planning to meet again on Friday, and until then, the plan is that we try it a little bit, run it locally, Cloud Run, and such stuff, and see what's going to happen. But besides that, we don't really have any other updates for now.
Got it. Appreciate that. Okay, so any questions on triage party before we move on through to the next one? All right. So next up is the Golang walkthrough. We've been kind of in the background working on some of the process, improving some of the process around the way that we do Go updates, and it has changed frequently enough, or it's changed enough, and also is something that is not quite known by a lot of people. So I wanted to take the opportunity, especially since we have Marky and Veronica working on the Golang 1.13.11 update, to take an opportunity to walk through some of the changes that have been made in recent time. So if you want to check that out, you can, I'm popping the link in the chat and the notes right now. That is about an hour-long recording, nothing too crazy, but it'll walk you through the KubeCross image building and promotion, what the PR looks like when you bump KubeCross in Kubernetes, and then handling the build dependencies.yaml file and Kubernetes. So that's good information overall to know as a release engineer. So take a chance to look at that when you get a chance. Part 2 of that is happening today. Later today, if you are on the release managers list, or you're on the release team list, you should have had an invite, received an invite to that. If you have not received an invite, and you're part of one of those teams and would like to attend, please let me know. I'll forward the calendar information to you. Yes, any questions on that? Okay, all right. Next up is the Golang 1.13.11 update. That is pending a few things. I've been talking to Marky and Veronica. They were part of that call that I mentioned last week. One of the things I noticed is that we need to do a repo infra bump So repo infra contains a lot of the utilities around Bazel that we use in various repos. One such repo is Kubernetes. When you do a Golang update, it is often necessary to do a update of repo infra. So you can pull in new Bazel rules.go Bazel Go rules. So it's like rules underscore go. So usually what we do is, or what we've started to do is update the rules within repo infra. And now that Kubernetes pulls in the rules from repo infra, then we bump the version of repo infra within Kubernetes. So I have a set of cherry picks. So the repo infra bump that we need for the master branch has already merged, and that is available in the chat, in the meeting notes, excuse me. And if you check that out, you'll see a link to the various cherry picks that have been happening. So cherry picks across the 118, 117, 116 branch. I'm running into some Bazel problems. Surprise, surprise. Getting them updated on the other release branches, but I should be able to work through that this week. Once that's done, we'll be able to. So we're already able to bump 113.11 on master, and that will be happening soon. And then after those cherry picks for repo infra bump merge to the release branches, we'll be able to cherry pick the Go 113.11 updates over to those release branches as well. Okay, any questions on that? And I apologize that the notes are kind of like just in time agenda style. We're getting off of a long weekend in the US, and we're just playing a little catch up. So any questions on that before I move into the next one? Okay. Next one up is GitHub to GCS, right? So GitHub to GCS is a tool that I decided to write over the weekend that is, so to provide you some background, and I was talking about this a little bit with some other people. We have some tools that we depend on within Kubernetes that are not quite Kubernetes, right? There may be, I guess, Kubernetes adjacent, right? So a few of those tools are your utilities or CNI plugins. CNI plugins are leveraged by the kubelet when instantiating clusters. So you'll see that the Kubernetes CNI package for apt and yum repos is something that we publish as a result of every release. Now, that's not entirely a true statement. There are some idiosyncrasies to the way that our current packages are configured that prevent us from doing exactly that. And the idiosyncrasies are based on the way the dependencies are configured for previous packages. We've run into issues in the past with the way that those dependencies are configured and have since fixed them. Essentially, a request for dependency request for a newer version of one of these packages means that an older version of Kubernetes that's in our package stream will automatically try to, if you're just installing it or trying to do an update, it will attempt to install the newest version of one of these packages. And the reason that's bad is that there is, it kind of explodes the matrix of things that we haven't tested, combinations of CRI tools and CNI plugins that we haven't tested with older versions of Kubernetes, right? So it's not easy or necessarily recommended to bring those packages into the stream. Without some way of testing this. So if you check out that PR, and let me share my screen at this point. So the idea here is that since these are kind of adjacent to Kubernetes, and they're something that we depend on for our releases altogether, the idea was what if we created GCS buckets that were artifact buckets for these projects, and then use those as the endpoints, to target when doing things like end-to-end tests or doing things like local testing for Kubernetes. So the question becomes, who maintains these buckets, right? And previously, those buckets were Google-owned buckets, which means to get those buckets updated, you have to find the set of Googlers that's responsible for updating those buckets, maybe create and push images or create and push new artifacts to those buckets. And it's a process that has honestly been a gap for multiple cycles. So this issue was opened, you can see it was July 31st, 2018, not that long ago. So this issue, kind of explains some of the problem, and then I've updated it more recently with action items on what we can do to get to kind of a better place with the way that we maintain these artifacts, right? So a few things happening here, actually creating the GCS bucket, updating the fetch URLs in KK to use the new buckets, actually updating the plugins to 0.85 for CNI at least, and then making sure that both the release managers and the maintainers of the CNI plugins actually have access to write to those buckets. So we're kind of here in this updating release documentation. We've also got some we are tracking to how to deprecate the Kubernetes CNI Dev and RPM packages. So I have a recent PR that's up here, and there are some CI fixes that need to be done. Essentially for this PR, what we're doing is we're doing a bit of cleanup on the control files, the package definitions for Debian and the RPM specs on the RPM side, to bundle the CNI plugins with the kubelet instead of having them as an individual package. Now, the reason that we decided to go this route is so that the dependency is essentially kind of self-contained, right? Kubelet is the only thing that requires it. So if we package it with the kubelet, then we no longer have to say that it depends on a certain version of it, which means that we can safely reintroduce it into our package stream without having to worry about the older versions of Kubernetes that have that dependency. So any questions on that? Okay. So I am hoping to get this merged in this week. And then from there, we need a way to, so going back to the whole, there are a set of Googlers that are responsible or able to upload to these buckets. Now that we've created a new bucket, at least for CNI, we're able to basically delegate that responsibility to the release managers as well as the CNI plugin repo maintainers. So the next question is, well, how do we get things to that bucket, right? And the simple answer is we can write a bash script, right? So this is an example of a bash script that I've used in the past to essentially do that, right? We're kind of just looping through architectures and SHA types and then, you know, grabbing them locally, right? And then from there, I'm kind of just doing a gsutil concurrent and recursive copy from that downloaded location into the new bucket, right? And that's just kind of the output of what that looks like. And I think that it's probably possible that this is happening a little differently every time. So I said to myself, what if we could write a tool that was fairly simple to use that would be able to do this, right? And that we could eventually use to wire into CI, whether it be PROW and GCV, to automatically essentially rip the releases from the GitHub releases, GitHub release assets, and then upload them to some GCS bucket, right? So that's what I wrote over the weekend. And if we want to check it out, we can do that here. So I'm going to make that a little bigger. Can you see that text okay? Someone just give me a yes.
Yep.
Cool, awesome. Right, so clearing my screen, I am in the release repo. I'm gonna check out master and do a little update. Right, and then, okay. All right, so I'm gonna compile the release tools and I want this new tool called GitHub to GCS, GH2 GCS. Right, that has installed. Don't worry about these dependencies. We're actively working on updating them. Um, so the next thing we want to do is actually run the tool, right? So this is some example usage I'm using. So one, let's actually look at the usage, right? So this is kind of example usage. It requests a GitHub org, a GitHub repo, a GCS bucket that you're going to be uploading to, a release directory, which is the directory that you want to land those releases in within the GCS bucket, and then some tags that you want to, some release tags that you want to target, right? So it's going to go look at, essentially it's going to create a release config, or this struct here. Ooh, that's a little too big. Where am I? GCS to go, right? That contains the information that you need. So the org, the repo, the release tags to look at, whether or not I should include pre-releases in the uploads, the GCS bucket, the release directory, and then some copy options, right? So the copy options are like whether or not the copy runs concurrently, whether or not it's recursive, and there's a no clobber flag that basically prevents you from overriding files that already exist on the remote. And then finally, there's this allow missing flag that kind of makes sure that, so for the CNI plugins instance, there's one release 072, which does not have any assets. So this flag is basically set, and you can see this default set here to make sure that if a release does not have assets, it essentially skips over it instead of previously it would have failed out, right? So we just want to skip over that stuff. So let's give this a run. Right, we'll do that. So in this output, it's kind of, there are some tips like, hey, I'm downloading from this repo at these tags, and then kicking off the download with 060. And it's writing these to a temp directory. and it's showing you the asset IDs for each of those files, as well as the download URLs. If you wanted to use that information to debug or compare things later, you can do that. Now, since we're in debug mode, it's showing you that it's using the following options for GCS. And so it's going to run concurrently, recursively, and not clobber the existing files. And then it also shows you the command output if you wanted to do that yourself with the files that exist, right? So it's letting me know that I have done this before. I've potentially done this before, and those assets already exist on the remote. And this is kind of the URL to get them, or the GCS URL to get them. So over to 072, it wasn't able to get the local source directory, which means the directory does not exist. This is kind of like an OS stat. And it tells you that here, doesn't exist. It's going to skip this GCS upload. And then moving on to 086, it's also a release that existed on that bucket. So it's going to skip those items, and this is kind of output from this gsutil copy command, right? So if we go back to that PR, I have a link here that gets you to the bucket. And this could be, you know, gsutil ls, and then whatever the bucket name is. But you can see that we've got all of these things uploaded, and you know, 060, all of those CNI plugins are here. And you can see that they were uploaded yesterday, or last modified yesterday, but also uploaded yesterday. So that is, so again, the idea is that we would take this tool. It's early days, it's just merged, but I think it's does what I expect it to, or does at least what that bash script was doing before, and a little more. The next piece of this I would like to do is here, supporting downloading releases via YAML config. So the idea is that you know, we've got this config struct, which would contain a set of release configs, and the release configs would look roughly like, I don't know if I still have it here. It would look roughly like this, right? Right, so kind of specifying the org, repo, releases that you want to update, and then it's basically a set of those, right? So if I was to kind of run this without the tags, it is, and I'm not going to actually let that run, but you can see that it's actually going to go into the repo and pull all of the releases, right? So 086 through 060, right? And it's going to do that download operation. This would also result in the skip existing items. So yeah, that's it mostly. Any questions on that? To answer Sasha's question, is it possible to update the files in the bucket, or is the retention policy not allowing for that use case? The short answer is I don't know yet. I use the bucket that I know I have access to. So there are some additional things that we want to check out regarding retention policies to ensure that that works all the time. And thank you for doing the review. Alrighty. So any questions on that? All right. So Sasha, actually a question for you. I swear there is, I know that there's one issue that I opened for CRI tools about the debs and RPMs. I swear that I remember reading a conversation somewhere about creating the GCS bucket for CRI tools as well, but I have no idea where it is. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we had a little issue last week, I think so, where my Cry Tools update PR got reverted because I changed the download URL to go to GitHub, and there was this API rate limiting from some test hit. And yeah, the idea would be now to, because I don't have access to that bucket, the idea would be now to use the Reese engineering bucket to pull it directly from there.
Got it. So, okay. So the conversation is probably on that PR, on that revert PR.
I mean, we also had conversations about building Cry tools via QPKG, right?
Yes. Yes. And that will hopefully happen this cycle as well. I need to kind of turn my attention back to QPKG to update the specs and stuff like that. Specifically on the RPM side, I think most of the dev stuff is okay, but the RPM side, since I'm on Debian, has not had, or I'm on Ubuntu, has not had the same vetting. So yeah, let's, if you can actually open a request in Kates.io and tag me on that for a CRI bucket, we can get that moving forward, and we can make sure that you have access to it as well.
Yeah, I can do it.
Cool. All right. All right, so next thing up is distroless and removing Debian base images. This was a previous conversation topic and a current one and an active one and a continuing one. And we actually have DIMS on the call today. And so, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. DIMS, can you give an update from your side, and I can fill in whatever else is going on?
Hi. So distroless work had been stuck for quite some time. And the reason was there was a problem with Klog when in scalability jobs. So we were trying to figure out an alternative way to unblock that work, and we were able to find something that works. So essentially the problem turned out to be we needed shell, bash specifically, in many of our images because we were redirecting stdio and std error, std error and std out. So the answer was to have Go-based script, Go-based binary, which would redirect the streams instead of using bash. So that kind of, that is what we ended up calling go-runner. That's a new image. It has a single binary called go-runner, which would redirect the output and the error streams. So we turned around and used this Go runner for making updates to the API server and the scheduler. So that was like the first thing that got updated. That unblocked those two images to be distroless, which means we don't have to, it does not depend on Debian base or Debian IP tables. So we don't have to worry about CVEs for these images coming in from random things that ended up in the Debian base image. So, and then the next problem was the controller manager. The problem with controller manager was there were some scenarios in controller manager where we needed to shell out, and one of those was flex volumes. So as you know, flex volumes, you can have like a script that is dropped in a specific directory, and the controller manager would run the flex volume script for initialization and attach detach functions. So and we were talking to SIG storage, and SIG storage had already sent out information saying, okay, who needs this facility now that we have CSI and whatnot. So it turned out not to be too much of a problem, because what we are saying now in 6 storages, we are not deprecating the feature of flex volumes. The feature is going to be there. You just need your own image with bash in it if you want this functionality. So that helped us strip out one more thing. And then the next thing was HCD. HCD was more of an issue than the rest of the images, because HCD, there is a startup script in the image which will turn around and look to see if HCD versions have changed and whether the HCD on disk, the volume on disk, needs to be updated. And it does a series of calls to HCDCTL and the HCD binary itself to update the information in the HCD data directory. So, so it still needed bash. So what we ended up doing for this was, instead of having the entire Debian base, we would just use bash static. So statically linked bash. So this would significantly reduce, so basically between Go runner on the rest of the things and bash static on the HCD image, we were able to get things going and unblock. Right now, the only image that needs, everything has merged so far. So the only thing that we haven't been able to poke at is kubeproxy. Kubeproxy by definition uses IP tables and IPVS, so it needs Debian base. If anybody has any good ideas about how we deal with kubeproxy, please ping me and we can talk about it. Other than that, all the changes are in. So come 119, we will have distroless base images for almost all the things that we have. Back to you, Stephen.
Awesome update. Thanks, Dims. So that is, so that's an exciting update on a few different levels. It increases our security posture across the base of images that we produce. During releases, it also allows us to, I think within or kind of underneath all of those updates, a really important one is that those images are now on Kubernetes community infra, right? So that means that you, I, DIMS, all the people who have access to cut those images now have the ability to do that and push them and promote them without having to find someone who can do that within Google, right? So that's a really, really big step for us. That's us taking more control of the release process overall. So really excited to see this work, and I really appreciate all the help and work that you've done, DIMS, to kick that stuff back off. I've taken so some interesting links within within that note on the agenda. So if you want to look at the tracking issues for distroless, there's a link to that. The Debian base tracking, image tracking is there too. The base exceptions list. So the base exceptions list is basically a list of base exceptions, image exceptions to the base images, right? So places where we cannot rebase to distroless because of some reason, right? So that list includes where we're getting the image for, sort of what the image is about, the base that it's using, the reason for the exception, as well as the owners to go to for that. So given that work has kind of kicked off or been reinvigorated this cycle, we're going to be working on updating the KEP. Always important to update KEPs, right? So there's an enhancement tracking issue there in the notes. That's 1729, and then the KEP itself is under KEPs SIG release 1729, rebase images to distroless. I'll be working on I'll be working on an update for that. I've talked to the some of the people who are responsible on the Google side, so Yuan Ma and Tim Allclear, about taking over that KEP. And I think Jake Sanders, Deka Gaijin, is working on distroless internally at Google right now. So I'm going to be working with them to provide updates on that KEP. So I know that was a lot. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so I realize there was also a question in the channel earlier today regarding the base images, right? So it's hey team, I just observed some irregularities in Kubernetes 118.3. Debian IP table seems to be updated using updated tag of Debian base, but the make file for Debian base still has the older tag. So I had some follow-up questions. One, Debian base, Debian IP tables will use pre-built Debian base image after pulling from the registry and not the one which is currently built. Is that intentional? And two, aren't Debian base and Debian IP tables base images built for every release? So to answer that question, to have that recorded, no, they should not be. They should not be updated for every release, or rather, they should not be built on every release branch. The configs are meant to be used, or rather, we do image building directly from master. So master will always have the most up-to-date configs for base images. What we do is we create new base images from the master branch. We promote those, we leverage those on master, and then we start cherry picking them back to the active release branches. So I intentionally did not update the versions or the dependencies.yaml in Makefile, in the dependencies.yaml, and various places in the Docker file, because one of the big things that changes between the current master branch and the previous branches is that we're moving to Kate's infra for building, pushing, promoting these images, right? So some things within the Makefile are intentionally different. What I don't want to do is enable image building for previous branches that results in a place where someone's building an image off of a previous branch and it somehow gets into some image stream that someone cares about, right? So I don't know what I'm curious about, like, what you think the best way to handle this is. Maybe Dims, you have some opinions. I was considering removing those images altogether. Rather, removing the configs or the make files and whatnot for those images altogether within the previous branches. I don't know if that makes sense though.
Not too sure, Steven.
Yeah, I think we'd have to determine where else it's being used. I think if we remove them from previous branches, it does signal that it's only available in master. I think some of this also needs to be accompanied with I think that a lot of the work that we've done because we know enough about each of those individual pieces to tie them together, but there is not currently documentation on how to do any of this. So that's something that we need to fix. So I think once we have that documentation in place, I think we're in a place to kind of like update a README on a previous branch to say, hey, image building happens on master because of blah, 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 and remove the utilities to do that.
There might be some issues with downstream users, Steven, because typically we have self-contained, right? Everything that we release is buildable from when you check out a branch, right? So I think we'll need a larger discussion.
Yeah, that's fair. going back to my point, I have no idea what the right way to do this is.
Correct. Exactly. Right.
I think it's new territory for some of us because we haven't really cut over infrastructure that many times in the project. So I think we're learning as we go, and I think we're getting closer to the point where we understand all of the systems in place to actually get these things done. So again, I'm super excited and appreciative for all the work that y'all have been doing to push this along. I think we're like, I want to say we're close. We're so close. Like we're so close. We have we've mostly wrangled image building. We're getting to the point where we're wrangling a lot of the other artifacts, the debs and RPMs. The staging and release process is very close to being able to happen on Kubernetes infrastructure after the vanity domain flip for kates.gcr.io happens. And yeah, I think those are the big things at least. So Jim, you had reached out to me and I forgot to respond regarding the CV stuff, for images. So I'm gonna kick that conversation back off in Kate's infra. Dims, I don't know if you have comments on that. I know that there was some work to actively scan images going into the new community GCP projects. I think the API is enabled maybe, or it can be enabled fairly easily with our scripts now.
I saw that there is an option to scan the images, but I don't think any of us have looked into what it means, who will it send, nag emails to and stuff like that. So we need to figure out the whole thing. What I would say is we should open up an issue in Kubernetes Kates.io and follow up there and get eyes from, say, Timahawk and Aaron and Bart and folks like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Do that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's an issue open. I just have to dig it up, and once that, I'll do some pokes on that one.
Right, and the other thing is, like, is this the only scanner we'll be using? Is there any other types of scan that we need to do? So that is some other things that we need to think about as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about is like, how does that work for images that are already there, right? Are we going to do backfill scans? Do we, like, what's the point what's the policy for this? Like, how many images do we care about?
Yeah.
At which versions? Yada yada yada. Right.
And it's going to cost also. It's not a free service, so we need to figure out how much it would cost for backfilling and for regular operations as well.
Cool. So Jim, once we start up some of that, once there's active work to be done, I'll ping you. A few people have pinged me as well on the CV images and on the CVE scanning, and obviously because they're CV related, not all of these conversations have been public, or most of these conversations have not been public, but we're getting closer to the point where we can start considering this. So just giving you an update.
Awesome. That sounds good.
Cool. Okay. All right, we're at the end of the agenda. Are there other topics that people wanted to talk about? Okay. I thought of one. Sasha, you've been working on, I believe you started working on something for the getting jobs ID?
Yes.
Yes. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was working on moving over the release lib SH stuff. I can link the PR here to our Golang based implementation. So yeah, we have basically multiple functions in release lib.sh, which have a higher complexity than I initially thought. But the idea is now to move it partially over to our Golang based implementation and actually add tests. And yeah, I'm moving forward with that. And if I'm done with the, how is it called, get release version or set release version function, then we can get rid of find green build, for example. And we could also migrate one part of Energo or the Golang based Energo version on top of that. I also created another issue where I did some research on the initial work from Hannes. And because we right now build patch releases from GCP Manager, which is pretty cool. But we also have some parallel implementation, which is a Golang wrapper for the existing bash scripts in PKG patch internal. I reused parts of that source code for the Krell announce subcommand, which is also new. But I think we have to decide somehow if we want to move forward with Krell GCP Manager for building patch releases, which I would prefer. And then we would do a little cleanup of the internal patch Golang stuff. And we can also remove some other bash scripts like the Railnodes bash script, which just is used by Krell patch announce right now.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, so I was looking over some of that stuff, and I didn't get a chance to do a full review just yet. But for patch announce, feel free to make that go away. We don't currently use it. I think we can take what we learned from it and reshape that to be maybe a subcommand or a flag for the Krell announce tool, right? So it can be Krell announce, type patch or something like that, right? That would allow us to send patch notifications as well. From the SendGrid side, I have a SendGrid account that we can use for Kubernetes, and I think that within their free tier, it's way more. It allows you to send way more mail than we will be for this tool. So I kind of created that account and put it off to the side, but I'll bring it back up and see how we can start wiring some of the stuff up to send test emails. I think that for the announce, I'm going to leave a post merge review on that announce PR. I think the one thing that we need to be careful about is where we send mail, right? So there should be a mock mode that can only send mail to yourself, kind of thing. I think that was my one suggestion that I was planning on making. Get job cache or whatever the thing is called. Yeah. So get job cache, that is probably one of the more important things that we could do, because get job cache, like you were mentioning, kind of tumbles into a bunch of other tools that shell-based tools that we're reliant on for the current release process. So I think once that falls into place, more of the Anago re-implementation in Go can happen and faster. So thank you for that work. The job cache, I think the job cache stuff within the shell-based tools is probably one of the more complex pieces of bash I've seen ever. So thank you for starting to tackle that. I think that was I think that once we get over that hurdle, we're going to be a lot closer to the Go-based Anago implementation.
Yeah, cool. And we don't want to send announce emails in Anago, right? We do it manually, and that's the plan for the future as well.
Yeah. I mean, for now, I think it's easiest to send them manually if we get a printout of if we just get a printout, kind of what release notify -print is doing right now, of where those emails are located. or where the email text is located, then that should be simple enough for a release manager to just kind of copy and paste manually. The problem, I think the problem that we have today regarding announce is that we do not have our release process doesn't run, as you know, it doesn't run kind of end to end, right? There are things that we have to do in between, and then also there is a post-release process of actually generating and uploading the debs and RPMs, right, for that current release version. So that's kind of the reason that I don't want announce on for our current process, because what we're announcing is essentially that we haven't finished the release, right? We should only be using that announce to announce that we have completed the release, and right now we cannot complete a release until we can support debs and RPMs being pushed into our own apt and yum repos, or we have a mechanism to ensure that the Googlers that are building the debs and RPMs today can do that quickly after the release is cut. So yeah, that was kind of the reason for not enabling announce right now.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So Rob, you have a quick CI signal update / question. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a little low though.
I'll bring it up there. Okay. Just the quick update is that Dan has set up a sheet and divvied out the jobs across the shadows on the team, which has helped to focus all of us on a specific set of jobs and try and upscale and monitor those jobs and so on and so forth. So that's it's early days with that spreadsheet, and it may not be the way it's done forever. But in looking at that, it kind of gives us a roster, and it gives us, like I said, jobs to focus on. One of the things that I was looking at in TestGrid was that it offers a little REST API to return some SVG, which gives a little button to say whether or not a test is passing, failing, or whether or not it's flaky. And so I tried to pull that scalable vectors graphic into Google Sheets, but that was problematic. So I'm trying to do, so I've logged a little bug, you know, as a consumer with Google Sheets saying, can we insert some SVG as an image, because that feature doesn't exist. And then on the TestGrid side, I logged an issue to say, can we modify the SVG code to return some proper XML that Sheets will more likely consume, so that it's namespaced and has an XML tag on the outer element and so on. In terms of reaching out to somebody on TestGrid, who would be a good person to talk to on that? Or do we
Sasha
know
might know better. Maybe yeah. Eric, Feda of FedaBot fame.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I could ask Eric. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Sasha, I know you were working on doing like TestGrid updates in K-release. Do you know who the best contact point is?
No, I think it depends a bit on the tests.
Okay, not specifically for the tests, but TestGrid implementation, right? So who's managing the repo?
No, I don't know it.
Okay,
Eric
cool.
would know though. I'll ask Eric.
Yeah, Eric should know.
Okay,
I would
cool.
also suggest taking a look at TestGrid Shot. So TestGrid Shot is, give me a second. That's within K-release as well. And essentially we run that right before we cut a release. That kind of gives us a snapshot of the issues that's the current state of the master and informing
Awesome.
jobs, right? So maybe you can look at some of that implementation.
Sure.
That was initially done by Carlos or it was adapted. I'm forgetting now, but Carlos's one of the people who has been
Yeah.
updating this to support kind of like print options. And Sasha, I think you also worked on this along with Hannes.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
looks cool.
So yeah, it would be cool to it'd be
It's
cool
only
to
a small little thing, right? It's not that important now or anything, but it just might be a nice to have, you know.
yeah, but like kind of mushing the teams together, right? Finding ways that we use these different tools and making sure that they're useful to everyone, right?
Yep.
So yeah, check that out. It would be cool to see a simple Go implementation of this one, although it's probably not necessary, but I could imagine a Go tool that worked on CI Signal doing a lot more for us than just
Gotcha,
doing
yeah.
snapshots. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go through this and I'll follow up with Eric.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. So last thing on the, I'm gonna do one last thing. I know we have a minute left. If any release managers have bandwidth to review this PR, it is pretty important for us. I'm gonna pop it in the chat because I can't find the meeting notes at the moment. But essentially that is work from Linus to allow us to essentially edit a manifest within Kates.io. So this is a manifest for image promotion. So the idea that I had in my head was essentially if we're doing staging and promotion of release images, we need a way to ensure that the images, that we can easily grab the new staging images since it's a lot of them. It's kind of sharded across all of the different, the various images plus, times however many architectures, right? So this tool should create kind of a new manifest available for promotion that we can then add to Kates.io or update in a Kates.io PR. So if you have time to take a look at that, take a look at that. That is Kubernetes SIGs Kates container image promoter pull 210. And that is all we got time for. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us every week. I really appreciate it. If you're on the release management or release team, release team, 119 release team, we have that Golang update walkthrough happening later today. So check that out and catch you at the next one. Later.
Awesome. See you.